We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. I'm late to the party, but Disney's Encanto is fantastic, and I had a great time watching that twice this past week because it was totally.
I thought the music was just sort of so-so.
Really?
I thought the songs were so-so, and every song ends up in a dream sequence, but not really because they end up still covered in whatever flower pollen that they walk through during the dream sequence thingy that they're bouncing. I don't know. I thought it was good.
Okay.
I enjoyed it, but it felt like a B tier.
Really?
Disney movie.
I thought it was a masterpiece. I thought it's one of their best.
I did not think that. But and the fact that Lin-Manuel Miranda. I'm sorry. It's too many like M and N sounds for me to get them all out in a row. But he did the music.
Yes.
And I thought, or the lyrics or something.
He wrote the
all
songs, the original songs.
Yeah. And I was disappointed to learn that, to be honest with you. I thought that they would have been better than they were. For me. But I'm willing to watch it again. Maybe I was not in the right frame of mind. But I was expecting I'll be honest with you, I was expecting a lot.
Okay.
Because I had heard really good things about it.
See, I went in with pretty much no like hype or anything. I had somehow missed all of the talk about it. So to me, it was all a surprise, and I thought it was visually beautiful. I thought the music was excellent. I thought the story was great, and I thought it was one of Disney's best. So there we go. Differing opinions. I don't know if I would differ opinions on that one, but I thought it was good. Okay.
I mean, it's certainly worth a watch. It certainly is. I also saw the Something's Wrong with Ron or whatever it is.
Ron's Gone Wrong.
Yeah, I saw that one too. So I haven't
watched that yet. So I don't know.
Well, we're doing dry January. My wife has decided that that's what we're doing. So we are doing it, which is fine because I haven't been drinking nearly as much as I did at the beginning of COVID. Let's not talk about that whole blur of a couple of months.
That's why it's dry now. It's all gone.
Yeah, it's right. But so I'm much more alert during some of these watching of movies, and but I didn't. It was fine. I've seen Suicide Squad, the new one,
Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
That makes all the difference.
You know what really makes it fun is having to stop every 5 seconds to answer all the questions my wife has about it because she has absolutely no idea what's going on at any given time. I'm like, well, what are you going to do? Anywho, so yes, today we're going to do a really quick review of the Beyerdynamic MMX 100. Is that what the heck?
I have no idea what you've got, so.
MMX 100 headphones.
MMX
They're a gaming headset is what I think they are technically coined as. And I reviewed them on AV Gadgets. You can go check it out, the review out there. Generally positive. If you want the Too Long Didn't Read version, buy them for your kids.
Okay.
So, but we'll be doing that in just a few seconds. So just hang on while we do our intro stuff, and then we'll get right into it. So this is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your questions answered. All you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You go to avrant.com, see all of our podcast episodes there. Facebook.com/avrant podcast, YouTube.com/avrant. You can contact us directly. Rob at avrant.com. His Twitter is at FirstReflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter is at avrant_Tom. So we want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, all you have to do is support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you do that is going to avrant.com, click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and leave us a PayPal donation. So we want to thank those who have done that this last week, including Kevin, Julian, and Terry, who's obviously their New Year resolution was to be more generous. And thank you very much for making that happen. So thank you, Kevin, Julian, and Terry.
Well, that's very nice, Kevin, Julian, Terry. Thank you so much for the PayPal donations. Really do appreciate the financial support.
So we also have 135 patrons over at patreon.com. So Patreon is a service where you can sign up to become a monthly subscribing contributing member of our podcast community. Every month, Patreon will take some money from you and give most of it to us. So we have 135 patrons, including Jack, who says he's been there from the beginning. Julian, who thanks us for the reminder to update his credit card information, because apparently he was one of the ones that fell off at the end of the last month. And Terry. So Jack, Julian, and Terry. It's probably the same Julian and Terry, but if they're not the same Julian and Terry, then thank you to new Julian, new Terry.
Well, that's patreon.com/AVRant podcast. If you would like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation, and a big thank you to our 135 patrons. It's ticked back up a couple. And Jack, Julian, and Terry, thank you for being 3 of them.
And we also want to thank those who have supported us in some way but couldn't do it financially or didn't need to do it financially. And if you have done that, all you do is let us know what you did, and we will thank you on this podcast. So Joe told Aperion Audio that he wouldn't have known about them if it weren't for our podcast, hopefully while he was purchasing something.
He was indeed. Joe, congratulations on that purchase. I already know he's enjoying it, so thank you very much for talking us up to Aperion.
Bertrand sent a movie code to me since neither he nor Rob could use it in Canada. So it's what is
the
it
discs
for?
work just fine, but not
something?
the codes.
I don't remember what it was for. It's a
Terminator 2.
It's a code, but what movie?
Judgment Day. Terminator 2.
Terminator 2 Judgment
Our
Day.
Skype is glitching out.
And glitching, yes. Yes. Even though my internet is now as rock solid as it's ever been. I've been out of internet since Friday. Friday,
it was crazy.
It's Monday morning. Friday night, my internet went out, and we spent all weekend trying to get it back up and they finally sent out. Well, they sent out somebody Sunday night, and he kind of got that fixed. But it turns out that my it's been going for a while, and they switched out all the lines all the way back to the pole and redid all the hardware at the pole because of how bad everything was.
Yowza.
So. But that didn't happen until last night, so Monday night, and today's Tuesday, right? Did I say that? I don't know.
Yep.
I'm all confused. So there we go. So yeah, Bertrand, thank you very much.
Thank
Mario sent a diagram to me with permission to use it on AV Gadgets. It's a diagram on what the heck we mean when we say a male inlet and a female inlet and everything else when you're trying to do an in-wall extension cord for your wall-mounted flat panel display. So thank you very much. I am definitely going to, in fact, I plan on writing an entire article around this one.
This would also apply to projectors, ceiling mounts, and wanting to have an outlet, a regular female outlet that is close by your projector, but then you actually want to plug it into a battery backup, and the battery backup lives where the rest of your equipment lives. So this is also a diagram that would be applicable for that. Instead of dropping the Romex line down the wall just to get it to where a flat panel TV would be, you would be stringing it above your ceiling and maybe down a wall, but it's the very same idea.
Right. We also got notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going during this pandemic. So if you're in the future and you're like, what pandemic? Good for you.
That would be great if we can get there.
Glad you made it. hopefully I'm still around. Jack, thanks for Jack says he thanks for keeping some sense of normalcy during the pandemic, and we should remind everyone to update their signatures whenever they post to include a link to AVRant. So that's easy publicity if they are on forums or Reddit or whatever. That is actually not a bad idea. Or AV Gadgets. Wouldn't kill you to do that. Chris is a member of the 2 Hour Plus Club. Always recommends to people online or in person that they write to us and listen in, and thinks we do an incredible job of keeping up with all the latest information and stuff. I actually, when I'm on the Reddit, I want to say, you know what this question would be good for? AVRant. You send it over to Rob because you need to explain what the heck you're talking about. I did publish that article about how to ask questions. It is on AV Gadgets right now. Gurinder, the kids are back to remote learning, so much for the days off work he had scheduled. On the plus side, his wife bought a super long duster, and it made it so quick and easy to clean his AV rec that he's stolen it for the home theater. I might need one of those. Eric also says thank you. Dale says we did a fantastic job with our recommendations for his uncle's theater. He absolutely loves it. Great, Dale. I'm no idea who you are. Jason and Monty. So let's go back over from the beginning.
Yes.
Jack, Chris, Gurinder, Eric, Dale, Jason, and Monty. Who knows which Chris this is? It's a Chris.
Yep.
We have many Chris's.
I'll repeat the names. It's Jack, Chris, T, because we got 3 Chris's on the list this week. Gurinder,
really?
Eric,
Okay.
Dale, Jason, and Monty. Thank you all very much for sending us those notes of gratitude and encouragement, because they are very much appreciated. And a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions. And it does look as though Tom is preparing to show us the review of some headset. Beyerdynamic.
So this is a Bayer. Man, I always want to say Barry. Beyerdynamic gaming headset. So it's MMX 100.
Okay.
That comes in light gray, which is what you're seeing on YouTube if you're looking at it now, or in blackish or dark gray. I don't remember. I don't have those. And it has orange highlights, including an orange mute button and an orange volume control on it. It has a built-in, though it's removable microphone. And if you go to avgadgets.com and look at the review, there's actually an audio link where you can hear the difference between me using this microphone, the one that I'm using for the podcast, and the microphone that's on this thing.
Right.
And you will hear very clearly that the microphone that's on here is just fine for voiceover yelling at people to come res you.
Okay.
But other than that, you would not want to use it for you don't sound great, but you don't sound terrible. So overall, sound quality wise, the selling point, these are $100. They're over ear, built-in mic. Mute button is great because it actually has it comes out and then you engage it by pressing it and then it stays in, so you can physically feel when it's muted or not muted. And if Rob remembers our V-Moda headsets that we used a while back, they had a mute button which was click in one position or in the other, but I could never remember if down was mute or up was mute. This is so much more intuitive, so I really like that. The sound quality is just fine it's a little bass heavy, but you kind of expect that with the $100 headphones. So they're $100. They sound fine. The microphone works fine. The mute button's great. It has volume control on there as well if you're trying to level match something. They're comfortable. They don't clamp too hard. The big knock against them, if you want to call it that, is that these things are plastic as heck. When I first picked them up, I was like, they feel exactly like headphones that you get from like an airline. Like they have that kind of plastic feel for them, which was a very off-putting thing. And I said this in the review. They are so plasticky that when I first picked them up, I was like, ugh. That was literally my sound that made when I picked them up. But once I started using them, I actually really like them. And for $100, like these are the headsets I would buy my kids to play online games if I let them play online games, which I do not. They're $100, which means that for $100, they can earn enough allowance to buy new ones if they break the ones I gave them in a rage quit episode. Number one. Number two, they sound good enough that they are going to notice a difference when they go to crap headphones. And that's kind of what I'm going for when I want my kids to have good enough sound.
Good enough, yeah.
So that they recognize bad sound when it happens. But I don't need to be going and buying I think those V-Modas were like $400 or $300.
They were up there.
I don't need to buy that for my kids to play video games on, and that's literally what they've been using to play video games on. I'm like, you don't need this. This is way too much for you. But this is perfect, and because because it's so plasticky, I'm like, if they crack it or whatever,
chuck them around.
I don't feel like they're going to be that breakable, and if they are, I don't feel that that'll stop them from working. You know what I mean? So I overall I like them, and they did have a neat addition, which was they have two cords. So the first cord is just your regular plug it into the headset and it does the microphone and everything else.
That'd be the 4-pin 3.5 millimeter jack,
and the other cord splits out the microphone separately into a separate so if you're going to plug it into a PC, you can plug the headset part into one input and then put the microphone into a separate input so that so that you can get you can separate those two things out like you might want to do on the PC, which I thought was I didn't even think I've never even seen that before in a headset. So
that's
I thought
relatively common on gaming headsets because they know you might be doing both console, which is the single 3.5 millimeter jack that combines headphone and microphone all in one, and PC, which usually has those two things separated. But yeah, this is definitely a corded headset, right? There's no wireless.
There's no wireless option, which I thought they were perfectly fine. So if you're looking for a headset to play video games with, you won't care if you break them, but they still sound good enough and everything else. I think and go check out the rest of the review on avgadgets.com because it will explain more.
What was the model number one last time, so people know what they're looking for?
MMX 100.
There's also a 100. Okay.
There's also a 150, but that one's like a USB, so it has its own DAC and stuff.
Gotcha.
Whatever. Yeah, this one was fine for what I had needed. All right. Let's get to some news here. Catching up on CES, which we missed out on last week because it wasn't done happening yet. So we went through Samsung's TVs last week, but the Freestyle projector deserves a mention. It's $900 HD resolution LED-based projector, about the size of a smart speaker. Depends on how smart, I guess. What makes it cool is that it quickly senses the image it's throwing no matter how you set it up, and within a couple of seconds automatically adjusts keystone, tilt, focus, and color temperature to compensate for just about any placement. It's super quick and convenient, and there's a battery add-on and even a light bulb socket adapter. Plus, what?
So you could screw it
into a light bulb?
Where a light bulb would go, and they showed it like being used in a conference room, projecting down on a table from a light socket above. Yeah.
That's weird. It has a speaker built in, which probably sounds fantastic, and a lens cover that diffuses the light so you can use it as a smart bulb if you want, because nothing screams cost efficiency like replacing LED backlights and these things. Anyways, pre-orders are up now. So there you go. Samsung's Freestyle projector. Sounds fantastic. TCL marches on with mini LED backlights. The X9 series will bring their OD0 panels to North America for the first time. The OD stands for Optical Depth Zero.
Yep.
And brings the mini LEDs as close to the LCD layer as possible. But the big news literally is a 98-inch R754 with 192 local dimming zones for under $8,000. The specs are basically identical to the R646 series, so it isn't skimping on features, I guess.
So a 98-inch LCD for $8,000. $8,000. Still a lot of money, but that's a lot less money than any 98-inch flat panel we've ever seen before.
It's less than most of those JVC projectors do.
All of them except for the NP5.
I know, all except for the one we talked about last week. It's less than all of them. So if you're going for a 100-inch projection screen, you're like, maybe I'll get a 98-inch. The TCL also announced their 2022 TVs will be TrueCut Motion certified. Never heard of it. TrueCut Motion is a Pixelworks end-to-end solution that aims to standardize motion grading in a similar fashion to color grading. Their tools allow things like motion blur, shutter speed, and judder to be adjusted in post-production. But more than that, metadata is attached to the video file so that compensation can be applied for different nit levels for display frame rate capabilities.
So it's mostly post-production. It's mostly behind the scenes. If you go through the white paper that they have on their website, it's really quite interesting because they've collected a whole data set that is showing, based on different HDR formats, different nit levels, different color temperatures, things like that, that our perception of motion can change somewhat as those things go along. They talk about the number of deliverables that already have to be made for all the different formats that are going out there to the various streaming services and discs and even during the theatrical release. So this is basically a way to automate a good portion of what they do in those deliverables behind the scenes so that things like motion blur and judder don't look strange at, in terms of the file that is originally created. And then there's metadata from that process attached to it so that if your display is TrueCut Motion certified, basically it just won't mess it up. That's what it comes down to. It's kind of like the Netflix calibrated mode where it isn't really anything new. It's just that when you have it in that mode, it doesn't mess it up. It doesn't apply some weird, motion smoothing or whatever in the television itself. So, in a way, having this display TrueCut Motion certified basically just means that it's going to keep a bunch of stuff turned off as long as you have TrueCut Motion turned on. But behind the scenes is a pretty cool thing that might get used as frame rates keep changing.
Okay, dokie. Mm-hmm. Not really. I can't say I really getting all that worked up about that one, but I'm sure it's very exciting for people who produce things. Mm-hmm. Hisense joined the mini LED party with their U9H series that only comes in a 76-inch size and promises to deliver 2,000 nits. And also with the U8H series that promised 1,500 nits with 1,200 local dimming zones at some of the lowest prices for such specs in 55, 65, and 75 inches. So the U8 is not mini LED, but they have lots of local dimming zones.
The U8 is mini LED. It's just not quite as bright as the U9H
okay,
series.
so this is I didn't understand this wording.
Yeah,
there.
once you get down to U7H, then you're back to regular LEDs, not mini LEDs. But yeah, the U8H series is probably the one to keep an eye on because it's got the full range of screen sizes and mini LEDs now, 1,200 local dimming.
I feel like 192 local dimming zones for the 98-inch is not
from
enough.
the TCL.
Yeah, when you can get 1,200 local dimming zones, 75-inch.
But from it's the size for $8,000 in that TCL.
I understand.
Mm-hmm.
I understand. How do we feel about Hisense, though?
I mean, I was a fan of the U7G series in 2021. I thought that was the best.
We'll see what these look like, because I feel like they've been kind of hit or miss as far as their...
Yeah. No, the U7G was like your entry point to getting all the high-end gaming features. That was the lowest price for all the high-end gaming features out there in 2021. It was a pretty darn good TV. It was remarkably good in its grayscale tracking and its electro-optical transfer function during HDR. So the U8G was kind of like their take on what Samsung does, which is boost the brightness to all heck and forget about being accurate to things. So the U8H being even brighter with its mini LEDs is probably not going to be the most accurate thing in the world, but who knows? It's going to be bright and have mini LEDs.
All right. Sony's TV lineup got interesting. Let's start with the newest of the year. The A95K series are the first officially announced QD-OLED TVs. They'll be available in 55 and 65-inch sizes. No prices or release dates yet, though. As expected, the press is praising their ability to show fully saturated colors with higher brightness than LG Display's OLED panels. Because never in the history of the world has the media ever overreacted to something and then got excited about it and then put a headline up there that made people want to click on it just because of how inflammatory it was. Never has that happened, Rob.
Nope.
It's not happened.
First time.
With QD-OLED now the de facto flagship for Sony, they shuffled things around with their regular OLED series. The A90K will only come in 42 and 48-inch sizes this year, because you want an OLED, you definitely want it to be 42 inches. If you want a Master Series OLED in 55 or 65, you have to pony up for the A95K QD-OLEDs. And the 83-inch A90J remains in the lineup. There doesn't seem to be any 77-inch Master Series OLED offering. This was not going to be confusing to anyone who's listening to this, because these numbers are and these names are all so unique.
Yes,
that
I know.
Anyone who listened to this it absolutely knows what I just said.
If it ends
even though I, as the person who read it, have no idea what I just said.
If it ends in K, it's from 2022. If it ends in J, it's from 2021. So
I feel like I should read the whole thing again.
A90J,
that's how confusing this is.
A90J, the 83-inch A90J, that sticks around. That's the only 83-inch size from Sony. That's from 2021. It stays in the lineup. Nothing moves on the 83-inch. And then if you want the smaller sizes in the Master Series OLED, you got the two small sizes, 42 48-inch in the A90K. And then if you want 55 or 65, you go to the new QD OLEDs, the A95K. That's that part of it.
All right. Apparently, the good news is that the A80K series, which looks like it's getting all the picture quality goodies that the A90J series offered last year. The A80K comes in 55, 65, and 77-inch sizes.
Yep.
So I guess that's exciting.
Well, it means that the less expensive OLED series from Sony now has apparently all the same picture quality that the flagship OLEDs in 2021 used to have. So it's bringing that performance to a lower price, and you've got the full selection of sizes. So I think A80K is going to be a hit for Sony this year.
All right. The 8K Z9K series, which is 75 and 85 inches, and the 4K X95K series. I want to go to Sony personally and start slapping people. I swear to you, Rob, I am going to rage quit this podcast if I have to read any more of these numbers. Do you understand how impossible this is? Okay, so I'm starting from the beginning.
Okay.
Because this is very confusing. 8K.
Yeah. It's 8K resolution.
Right. The 8K resolution Z9K series, yes, which is in the 75 or 85 inch, and the 4K X95K, which isn't the same as the Z9K series. No. 65, 75, and 85 inch LCDs are Sony's first to use mini LED backlights.
That's right.
And that marks the return of. And why didn't they put LED someplace in their model names? And why is there a 9 and the other one's a 95? Why? Because. And that marks the return of Backlight Master Drive, which is a Transformer, a Decepticon. The X90K series will remain the value champ with full array local dimming, and they're promising VRR out of the box this year, because no one's ever not delivered on a promise, ever.
Mm-hmm. Especially Sony when it comes to VRR.
Yeah. I'm just going to power through.
Yeah.
Sony also shared more details about the PlayStation VR 2, although they didn't show the new headset yet. It'll use OLED displays with 2000 by 2040 resolution per eye and up to 120 frames per second. It uses inside-out tracking now with 4 cameras built into the headset instead of needing a camera on top of your TV.
Just like the Quest. If you're familiar with the Quest, same idea.
Well, welcome to like 5 years ago. Yeah. The headset itself has force feedback, so it's going to vibrate on your face.
It's going to buzz on your head.
Oh, that's annoying.
Yeah.
And it's a single USB-C cable to connect it to a PS5.
Much better than the original PlayStation VR with its breakout box and multiple cables.
Yeah. So outside of CES, Monoprice added a bunch of new Monolith series speakers. They've added some smaller Monolith Encore models with 5.25-inch drivers. Encore B5, $450 each. The B6s are $180. Encore
$30
C5.
less.
Woohoo! And well, at these price points, that's actually like 10%.
That's right.
20%, I mean. Encore C5 sensor for $200 versus the C6, which is at $250. And the Encore T5 tower for $330 each, and the T6 is $400. So this is the naming conventions I can get behind. Okay, the 5 is the size of the driver, 5-inch.
B for bookshelf, C for center,
C for
T
center,
for tower.
and T for tower.
Yep.
You see, this is easy.
That makes sense.
Sony.
It's logical.
And there's some larger and smaller THX in-wall models. The THX 465IW for in-wall, $700 each, and the THX 275 in-wall or IW for $350 each. Plus a single and dual 8-inch passive in-wall subwoofers, the MIW Sub 8, SUB8 for $400, and the MIW Sub 8 2, which probably has 2 drivers.
It has 2 8-inch drivers. That's
One
how
would
that works.
guess based on the number for $600. And now they've added THX certified on walls, the MOW1. Monoprice, I'm going to kiss you on the mouth for $300 each, and the MOW3 LCR, I love you so much, for $500, which is a 3-channel passive on-wall soundbar. So, yeah.
New Monolith speaker models to consider.
We'll see. I would love Monoprice to stay in this space as far as speakers are concerned, and subwoofers. I think the subwoofers, they have themselves a winning combination right now. I think speakers are a little bit harder to break into because there's so much competition out there. Yeah. Their pricing is certainly right, and they have the brand recognition as far as people knowing their name. I would love it if they stayed in the speaker space. I would also say that if you are excited about these prices and these speakers, I would not sleep on them. I would probably pick them up because prices are going to be going up over and over again. There's also some news from SVS. Did you catch that they renamed the 13 Ultra series the 4000 series? So
but that was ages ago.
Is it though?
Yeah.
I thought that they now have new cabinets. No, that's not new.
Maybe new cabinets, but no, the 13 Ultra became the 4000 series ages ago.
Oh, okay. Because I thought they had new cabinets, and now the amps are installed instead of having to order the amp separately, but whatever. All right, comments.
Whatever.
Joe wasted no time after we said last week that he should definitely audition either Aperion or SVS against the Deftex that he had owned for years. He ordered a set of Aperion Verus 3 Grand V6 tower, center, and bookshelves, and he instantly noticed a huge difference. There was no need for an A-B comparison. With the Aperion's individual sounds are much more separated and clear. Effects are much more directional. You can actually hear his Atmos speakers now. Movies have gone to another level, and he's hearing his favorite music in a new way. He loves it. So now he's got some Deftex for sale if anybody's looking for him wherever he is.
That's good. No regrets there. Congratulations.
Yes. Yeah. Aaron heard Bob's question a couple of weeks ago about converting his subwoofer output to Cat 6 and then back to RCA and how his subwoofer was way too quiet, so he wanted to troubleshoot. Aaron says he tried something similar with Cat 5e and Balin's to convert from RCA. His subs never worked properly with that setup, and as soon as he switched to regular RCA cables, his subs came to life, and that solved the problem. So Aaron's solution is pull that stuff out of the wall and run some real cables.
Yeah.
I don't know that's going to be.
I mean, it's not as though the coax cable itself is expensive. It's the running it through the walls.
It's the running it through the wall that's the problem. Yeah, believe me, the guy who was here fixing my whatever, he was internet. He had a lot of that stuff, and it was not expensive. I guess we're on the questions here. Mark's projector is a Sharp XVZ, because the end of the alphabet is the sexiest part of the alphabet.
Sure is.
XVZ 15,000.
Yep.
15000. Why don't they just cut off those zeros and call it the 15? Because they probably had that model number 2 years ago. He's using it with a 100-inch screen from about 12 feet away. At one point, a lightning strike actually damaged one of the projector's HDMI ports, but thankfully, the second HDMI port is still okay. He's at about 250% of the stated lamp life, and it's starting to become noticeable, one would think. He's also a bit worried after Tom describes the one time one of his lamps exploded. I would be concerned about that myself at this point. I'll be honest with you. The projector is 1080p. The HDMI cable running to it is buried behind the wall and ceiling, and it's only rated for 1080p as well. So we've got
a basic diagram just to get the
idea. Are
those
speakers in the ceiling?
Yeah, those. Let's see, surround right, surround back, but they are circular. So I think he's done his surrounds and surround backs as in ceilings. That's not really germane to the question we're asking, but just so we can see, he's got his AV receiver in a closet outside of the room, but it's just to the side of the room, so it isn't like the longest HDMI cable ever or anything, but it is in a different room, so went through the ceiling and the wall.
So he's looking for some advice. Should he just pay several $100s to get a replacement lamp? He's tempted to upgrade the whole projector, but his current budget tops out around $1,100. I'm going to say, if you had $8,000, you could get a TCL.
If he had that kind of budget, I don't think he would be posing this question, to be honest.
Yeah. Looking around, it seems like he'd still be getting 1080p at that price. Also, unless he changes the location of his projector or his screen size, he needs to be able to throw a 100-inch image with a lens a little over 12 feet away, and a lot of the lower cost projectors have a shorter throw distance than that. If he waits and saves up more money for a 4K projector, he'll need to replace the HDMI cable along with it, so that's a hassle. All in all, what do we think he should do? I mean, I don't think I've ever heard of a Sharp projector until this moment. I mean, I knew they existed, but I never knew anybody who owned one.
I owned one.
Did you really?
Yeah, I owned one back in the day. But yeah, they haven't really been around in the 4K era. It was all in the 1080p era, and it was DLP that they used in theirs. Okay, so my issue with this is, if you stick to your current budget of around $1,000, give or take
you have to say more money,
couple $100 than that. First of all, I think the projector you would get for that money would actually be a downgrade from the one you already have. You could get one that's brighter than what you have, but the black levels would be worse. The Sharps were pretty darn good. They were kind of the tip top of what 1080p DLP in the consumer realm did. So I'm not keen on spending only around $1,000 for a whole new projector. That would be a downgrade in image quality. That doesn't make sense to me. I think as long as you can still find replacement lamps for it, that is going to be like $300-400. I know that's a bit of a tough pill to swallow, but like I would save up. If I'm going to replace the whole projector, I want to save up anyway. And if it's become too dim to enjoy in the meantime, I think you kind of have to go with getting the replacement lamp. I just don't see the value in this case of getting a $1,100 projector. I just don't get the value out of it.
I think you need about $2,000 to get a refurbished Epson 5040 maybe.
Right. Something like that.
Around there.
And if you get to 2,500, 3,000, you can definitely get something that would be, at very least a feature upgrade with image quality parity, or maybe a slight, image quality upgrade once you get to that sort of price range. But that's more than double your current budget, right? So, yeah. But
I was trying to really quick look up how much a lamp costs for this thing, but I couldn't find anything really quickly. Yeah.
I know spending like a third of the available budget just on a lamp seems, but you got to look at the long game of it, right? Yeah, that's still considerably less than spending the entirety of the budget you have on a downgrade. That just doesn't compute for me.
That doesn't compute at all. Yeah, I agree with that. I'm going to agree with Rob on this one and say go ahead and get the new bulb.
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't spend all like I said. What was the website? There was a Projector Genie or Lamp
they're
Genie
gone. Projector Lamp Genie.
Are
is
they
gone.
really?
Yeah. They're gone now. So, I mean, I always point people to Projector Central because they have their list of lamp retailers, and they actually go by your area wherever you are. They location sense where you are. So, yeah, you can definitely find something available if you go through that.
Right. So, the OEM or directly from Sharp or whatever is almost certainly going to be the most expensive, but you should be able to find some lower cost alternatives out there. Just be very careful with the reviews. Read the reviews, see how people what they're experiencing and that sort of thing. And if it is the type of projector where you actually have to replace the bulb itself and not some of them you just drop a housing in, the bulb is inside the housing. Some of them you actually replace the bulb itself. If that is the case, do not ever touch that bulb with your bare hands.
Definitely
make sure
not.
that you're using a paper towel or gloves of some sort. Clean. No oil on the gloves, no powders or anything on the gloves, to touch that bulb, or you'll almost immediately destroy it. So that's just throwing that money away. So that's my one warning there.
Okay.
And then start saving up for an episode.
Yeah,
I think. Chad appreciated our discussion about his dedicated 7.4.4 theater plans. He feels better about his front speaker placements, false wall, and screen size now. That sounds like us. We're helpful. I have no idea what you're talking about, sir. We mentioned that the Onkyo likely has an RZ70 model in the works, and that it should be able to go up to 13 speakers. In his diagram, there are two smaller panels on the side walls just in front of the door. He purposely planned for those to go at the plus or minus 60 degrees, and he was thinking he would pre-wire for front wides regardless. So what do we think of a 9.4.4 configuration here? Should you just go for front wides right away? Well, I'm going to say no to that nonsense. So the wides are actually in the corners, it looks like.
No.
Is that right?
No, his front, in the diagram, he's warned that the front left and right speakers look closer to the walls than they'll be in real life. That's right. So he's got four subs, so that's why you're seeing two things on either side of the center there. Those are the subwoofers at the front of the room, and then the front left and right speakers in the diagram look very close to the corners. If you come down the side walls a little way, so right in front of the front left and right speakers, there's like what would be a 2-foot wide panel, and then like a 1-foot wide panel. Just in front of where the door is. So where those 1-foot wide acoustic panels are, that is the plus minus 60 degree marks. He's gonna pre-wire for front wides at the very least, but he's like, should I just go ahead and do those right off the bat? Front wides? I mean, you know me, I'm a front wide fan. I have a smaller room than yours, and I still deployed front wides, and I like them. So I'm not going to say no. I'm also definitely not going to say that you must. Right. I like your idea of pre-wiring for it because that's the time to do it when you're doing all your other wires and the drywall isn't up yet. You definitely want to run the wires ahead of time, so I'm all for that. We didn't see the RZ70 at CES.
We did not.
Didn't
there
hear
was
anything
no
about
receivers at all at CES. I searched for them and I couldn't find anything to report on. So there was
no idea if or when that rumored RZ70 model is actually going to arrive. The RZ50 does exist. There are people who have it. They're still on back order for the time being, but they're supposed to be shipping back out at the end of this month or the beginning of February. So you could certainly have one of those and go to 11 speakers, have your front wides pre-wired, or you could pick up like a Denon X6700H. That'll do the full 9.4 or 2.4 in that case, but you can just Y split out. Or wait longer to either see if the RZ70 does come to market or what Denon will update this year. Because Denon didn't update any of their upper tier AV receivers in 2021. They carried over the 2020 models, as we suspected they might do.
Right.
So we are expecting new models this year, but not right away, not until probably September, October timeframe.
I mean, I just feel like there's way too many speakers in this room, to be honest with you. But, I mean, wire for them, I guess. So what I would do if it were me is I would hook up my surround backs, because you have surround, you have two overhead Atmos speakers, you have surround backs, you have your front three speakers, you've got now wides as well, and I would start experimenting with a different, because even with the RZ50 you can do 9 floor level speakers, right?
Nope.
You only do 7?
Yeah, the RZ50 is 11 channels max, and it does not support front wides.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I guess my thought then it would be that before you would actually, when you got the receiver that was capable of doing the wides, then you would move your surround backs to the wide position, see if you thought it made a difference before you went all the way to actually buying speakers.
Like what I would say for you, Chad, is the room is still being constructed and finished. So go ahead and pre-wire for the front wides, do the construction and the finishing of the room. At that point, see what AV receivers are even available, and if there isn't one that does 9.2.4, if there isn't one that does front wides available at the time when you're ready to buy, don't let that stop you. You know, if what's available are 11 channel models, go with that. Don't continue to wait for a 13 channel model just so you can have front wides right away. That would be my advice, but I would pre-wire for it.
That sharp replacement bulb is like, there's stuff on Newegg that's like $50. I would question. It says it's genuine. It says it's genuine, but it goes from $258 down to $50. At
myprojectorlamps.com, I found the one that says OEM for $250. That sounds more in the ballpark what I would expect it to be. So.
Yeah, the OEM was $258. The OEM compatible was $96. And then this one doesn't even say.
I think I just pay the $250 for the OEM. I honestly would, and that's not that bad, really. You know, it's a quarter of the budget you had.
All right, sorry about that. Go back.
Track it.
Chris has a separate setup. Well, get out of here, sir. You're not welcome. Sorry, we don't do that around here. Receivers only. He isn't ready to replace his pre-pro yet. If and when he does, he says he'll listen to our advice. Liar. And get a receiver with pre-outs instead. All right. I need to lay off the coffee for a few minutes. Tom's getting cranky.
Okay.
And if and when he does, he says he'll listen to our advice and get. Oh, I'm sorry. I read that already. But for now, he still needs his amplification to be external. He's happy with his 3-channel amp for his front 3 speakers, but he's been using an 8-channel Rotel amp for his surround backs and Atmos speakers for the third time now, and it has gone out. And for the third time, it's gone out. He's had it repaired in warranty twice before. He figures he'll have to go through that again, but the repairs take like 3 months, and it might be even longer this time with all the parts shortages. So is there an inexpensive 8-channel amp we can recommend? I can recommend a whole bunch of really cheap, not 8-channel amps that together won't cost as much as that.
Yeah, you can get a bunch of stereo amps, the Fossies. Yeah, you get 4 of the Fossies.
Yeah, and one of those channel goes out, you're out 1 2-channel model instead of, and plus you get a big stack of amps. Who doesn't like a whole big stack of amps there?
It doesn't really look honestly, like a big stack when it's those ones because they're so little.
I know it doesn't. They're so little. But this is one of those situations where you're like, yes, you want the big box with the blue light in the front. Like the Monoprice just came out with those new Class D amps we talked about last week, which are ridiculously expensive.
Which I do have on the list because I don't know what qualifies as inexpensive to Chris.
Right.
Because to some like Rotel, that's where he's coming from. So maybe $2,000 is inexpensive in his book. I don't know.
I'm going to tell you, as far as sound quality wise, especially for surround backs and Atmos speakers, you're not looking at pushing a ton of power into them. As long as you have a linear amp, they're going to be putting out like 3 watts. So do you need a 250 watt per channel Rotel or Monolith or whatever in order to power those 8 channels? I just don't think that you do. I think you need like 50 watts and call it good, because none of these speakers are that far away from you. They're probably all around 84 to 86 dB efficient, and they're not going to get much louder than 85 anyway. So it's like 1 watt for most of it. So I really feel like you can get away with just a stack of Fossey amps.
Oh, you certainly could. Yeah, it's whether you want to have 4 power plugs, because that is a little bit of a hassle potentially. And if you've got a rack set up, then maybe you want one that's got rack ears and is easy to put in there. So I'm going to go in ascending expense. I'm going to start at the bottom. So, the bottom would be getting 4 of those Fossey stereo amplifiers, Class D.
I know that's a ludicrous thing to say. I realize that a lot of people are like, oh,
my God,
that's so dumb. But I feel like having a bunch of little amps stacked up next to each other would be so cute. You could like put little bunny ears on one of them and like little antlers on the other. It'd be very festive.
But there are 8-channel, usually marketed as distribution amplifiers, as
Right,
multi-zone amplifiers, but for quite affordable prices, totally reasonable. So I'll start with Outdoor Speaker Depot. They have their MX880. It is a Class D amplifier. It's 50 watts per channel. So you do have independent RCA inputs for each of those 8 channels on the back of that. $580, and it is rack mountable. So that is certainly an option there at the low end of the price, going a tick up to $750 if you really want Class AB. So a very similar thing, but this would be Audio Sources Amp 800 VS. That is Class AB. They rate it at 40 watts per channel, but Class AB instead of Class D for $750. Again, RCA inputs only, but individual inputs for each of the 8 channels. Audio Source also has a Class D variant, a little bit higher power rating, 65 watts per channel. The Audio Source AD508 is rated at, and that goes for $850. So those are sort of the distribution amps that you could look at. Now, an alternative would be over at Emotiva. They have their BasX A4. Now, that's a 4-channel amplifier, but you get 2 of them. They go for $550 each. So we're at $1,100 to get 2 of them, but that's a genuine 100 watts per channel, Class AB. Still RCA inputs only on the BasX amplifiers, but the Emotiva BasX A4, 2 of them for $1,100 total. It could certainly be an option. After that, we jump way up in price. So, as we mentioned, Monoprice has their Monolith Class D amplifiers, the Hypex N-Core. So they are 8-channel amplifiers, those models, and you could look at the M8-125X. That goes for $2,000. So we've, doubled the price of what we were looking at before. That has XLR inputs only. So it's a complete reverse. If you need XLR, because that's what you're already using, then this will work. But if you want RCA, then you'd need adapters for this one, the other direction. Now, if you want full, Class AB, super powerful, 200 watts per channel, you could look at a Monolith 9X, as the name implies. That is 9 channels. That is $2,150, even more expensive to go to that. And actually what that is 3 out of the 9 channels are 200 watts per channel, and then 6 out of the 9 channels are 100 watts per channel. They're using these stereo modules that go into the back of that. That also needs a 20 amp circuit, just like the M125X Class D one does. If we go beyond that, you could look at the even more powerful Emotiva XPA9 Gen 3. It's a similar idea to the Monolith 9X, but this one is 5 channels at 200 watts apiece, and then 4 of the stereo modules. Those actually are only rated at 65 watts per channel, but again, you're getting 9 channels there. That's $2,200. So then the last option out of these, you can get the Emotivas customized. So you could take 4 of the stereo modules and put that into a custom configuration that you can configure on their website. So that'd be 4 times 65 watts each of the stereo modules, 8 65-watt channels. But that's $1,600 for only 65 watts per channel. So that, to me, that doesn't make sense. Then we go back to like one of the audio sources, something like that. So those are the options I came up with. I don't know what you consider inexpensive, but there we go. One of those will get the job done.
75 times 4 is how much the Fossies cost.
Yeah, there you go.
In case you're wondering.
Yeah. That is the least expensive. But you'd have 4 power plugs.
You would have 4. And I think they have like inline power supplies too. So you have a little boxes someplace. That would be irritating. So, but if you have a rack, right? If you have a rack, you put a shelf on the rack instead of right there. You could just stack them all in there and put, hide everything.
Standing on the shelf.
Chris, what do we think
the
about
last one was the last one was Chris C. So now this is Chris H. This is Chris number 2, Chris H.
All right, so that was Chris C. All right, I thought I was doing something wrong there, but I wasn't. I was on the right guy. Chris H. What do we think about the new Emotiva BasX MC1 processor? It's a 13.2 channel prepo for only $1,000. Mm-hmm. It only has RCA pre-outs, although 2 subwoofer outputs offer both RCA and XLR, and there's no DRAC, just Emo Q for room correction. So is the good deal a bad deal? What's our take? It's the first I'm hearing of it, I'll be honest with you.
Right.
I don't pay attention to Emotiva anymore these days, because especially when it comes
as far
to
as their processors,
Yeah, because they haven't really been what's the word I'm looking for
reliable, fully functional.
Oh my God! Have you seen the interior of this thing?
It's pretty sparse.
It's a big old empty box.
I don't have a picture to show on YouTube, but it's pretty sparse inside there. So, I mean, what's interesting here is this is coming a little bit later than we might have expected, but this is the Emotiva branded version of the processor we've already seen sold as the Tone Winner AT300. That's what's going on here, because both Tone Winner and Emotiva, it's actually Jade Designs, who is the parent company and does all the designs behind the scenes. So the Tone Winner AT300, which unfortunately is marketed as a 16-channel receiver or pre-pro because it has 3 mono subwoofer outputs, and somehow that turns 13 channels plus 1 subwoofer output into 16 just because there are 3 jacks. So I guess they could have called this BasX MC1 a 17 channel since it has 4 subwoofer connections that you could potentially use. But no, it's 13 speakers plus 1 mono subwoofer that goes out there with multiple jacks for the subwoofer. But the Tone Winner AT300 is priced at $1,395, $1,400, but it has both RCA and XLR outputs, if that's super important to you. So they aren't identical. They aren't literally identical. But both of them are limited to HDMI 2.0. So that's one thing to consider. These aren't HDMI 2.1 devices. And then, yeah, the room EQ is very, very, very basic. Whether it's the Emo Q here or I can't even remember if Tone Winner had a name for theirs. But it's a single measurement position. That's what it is. One measurement position. And it's just a multi-band parametric EQ. And for some reason, they give 11 bands of parametric EQ to the 5 main channels, and then I think 7 to the other speaker channels, and then only 5 bands to the subwoofer, which is the one that needs EQ the most. So they kind of got that backwards. I would rather have 11 on the subwoofer and 5 on the speakers, if I'm being honest. But in any event, that's what you're getting with a single measurement position. So to me, that's like, I wouldn't use the room correction. I very well might use the manual EQ. I would want to measure myself and come up with the filters calculated by something like Room EQ Wizard. I would do that externally and then just enter the values into the parametric EQ, because you can do that manually. And that can totally work, but it's not an automated process at that point. That's
it seems like this process. Is like a mini DSP away from being an actual thing that I would consider
You could add
purchasing.
the 8-channel $1,000 mini DSP DRAC box.
Right, now you've got a $2,000 processor.
Yeah, now it's up to $2,000. And other than your height speakers, you could have DRAC applied to your 7 main floor level speakers. Now, this being 13-channel, it can run as either 9.1.4 or 7.1.6. So that's the enticing part of this thing, is that if you look at Denon or Onkyo's 13-channel models, then they're more expensive than this, even after you add on some relatively inexpensive external amplification. So I mean, I'm not against it, but I'm definitely not gung-ho for it. The lack of HDMI 2.1, that's a bit of a I'm kind of like, really? You brought it out now.
I guess.
Why not wait a month until... it's Emotiva, though, so who knows when HDMI 2.1 is actually going to come.
Wait for HDMI 2.2, and then you'll start seeing HDMI 2.1 roll. That being said, as far as people who... like, everything Rob's saying is correct. Okay, I just want to just start off there.
Okay.
But you got to look at who is actually looking at this and what are they looking at. And that's the hardest part about a pre-pro to me when it comes to trying to make a semi-fully fledged AV pre-pro for home theater, which is what this is geared towards because of the number of channels. Now, if it were 2 channels or 5 channels or something like that, maybe even 7 channels, you could say it's retro. It's only for people who care about the things that they cared about 10 years ago when they got into this, and they're not going to upgrade, and they're not going to change their projectors, and they're fine with 1080p and everything else. But this is not what this is it though? It's 13 channels, meaning they're trying to give you everything they can. They just can't give you everything. So it's well, I mean, it doesn't tick the right. It ticks just enough boxes to make you interested, and then lowers the price so that you'll compromise in order to buy it.
Kind of, yeah. Because, I mean, the obvious appeal here is if for the person who wants to go beyond 11, who wants to go beyond 7.1.4 and wants to have either front wides or wants to have 6 overheads, for $1,000, it's like probably the least expensive way to go beyond 11, although keep in mind, you've got to add all external amplifiers. So that definitely, has an impact on the price. But hey, you go and get the Outdoor Speaker Depot 8-channel, you get 2 of those for, just over $1,000. And you're still less expensive than an X6700H from Denon or something like that. So,
but you're also not getting all the features.
You're not getting
the room correction,
Odyssey or Dirac. Yeah, I mean, like if you were the person who was gonna do all of your room correction manually with Room EQ Wizard yourself anyway, okay, it's giving you a bunch of built-in parametric EQ. Not as many as I would want on the subwoofer, but it's giving you a bunch of built-in parametric EQ, so you can do it that way. I'm very in between. I think this is a very specific customer who's going to want this.
If you're wondering how they can price anything that has this many channels and even at any level of processing to $1,000, it's because you're on their website where you're going to buy the amps to go along with it.
Absolutely.
And that's how they're making it. This is priced probably very close to cost for them.
Yeah.
It's making some money, but not a lot.
Yeah, like previously that Tone Winner AT300 at $1,400, that was the least expensive way to go beyond 11.
Yeah.
And like I say, that it's the exact same platform inside. Other than the Tone Winner version having XLR outputs, that's the same processor.
Yeah. So, I don't necessarily love the idea of somebody trying to make you compromise because of price. And I'm the kind of person who has been tempted enough times to do that and has done it enough times and has lived with the regret. So that if you ask me, do I think you should buy this? My answer is going to be no, because it's not what you actually want.
It's almost another one of those cases of if you are the perfect customer for this, you don't need to ask us, because you're just like, yep, I can check all the boxes that I want to, and I don't care about the boxes that this doesn't check, and I don't need to ask anybody because I'm the person who already knows that.
If you're trying to have us convince you that this is the right pre-pro for you and this is your big chance to get into separates cheaply, which is where I was before I got my first big purchase in home theater, I was looking at the Outlaw stuff, which was, great pricing, insanely good pricing for what you were getting. But feature-wise, you were 2 or 3 years behind the curve. And I just knew that's not where I wanted to be. So you really have to, if you're questioning whether or not you can live with the feature set that's on here, the answer to your question is you cannot. Because you're questioning it. You're already questioning it.
And given the pricing, the aggressive pricing that Onkyo did on the RZ50, assuming that RZ70 does come at some point and hopefully the pricing remains similarly aggressive, I think that's going to be the value/feature champ coming out. That's why we're excited to see it officially get announced.
All right, Kevin. Kevin's Denon X7200WA receiver has been in Denon Service Center since mid-August. He's had a third-party warranty on it, and he was recently informed that the repairs will likely come to around $1,300. With the wait having been so long and the price being quite high, the third-party warranty will offer to cash him out for the price of the repair, which he could then put towards a new receiver. That might be a blessing in disguise, because he was running the original 11 speaker configuration, 7.1 plus front heights and front wides, but then recently added 4 of the Sonance Mag 6 in-ceiling speakers we're always recommending, but he wants to keep his front wide, so 9.2.4 would be perfect, and he'd need a new receiver for that anyway. He already owns the Emotiva XPA3 to power his front 3 speakers, so should he get a Denon X6700H or the more expensive 8500H, or even the more expensive 8500HA? HDMI 2.1 isn't super important to him since he's using a projector, but what are the other feature differences beside price that might push him to one or the other? So I'm looking at his theater right now. It's black with red highlights, which is very nice.
And in the image, he isn't showing it with his projector screen down, but he does have both a flat panel and then a projector screen that motorized projector screen that comes down in front. So not seeing an image of that in today's pictures, but that is there. And that actually influences my recommendation in this instance, because really, the major feature difference that I would point out is that the X6700H, which is actually the least expensive out of these options, That is the only one out of these options that has the dual speaker preset option, which is you can have one speaker preset with one run of Odyssey and then a second slot that lets you run Odyssey a second time and save it right on the AV receiver. The X8500H and the 8500HA do not have the two Odyssey slots that you can switch between easily on the receiver itself, because that's actually a much older model that they've just kind of kept updating to keep it in the lineup as the flagship. So given that you have two different configurations, one with screen up, one with screen down, having those two Odyssey slots might actually be quite a benefit with your X6700H as the option there. Given that it costs less and it has that feature, I'm
right.
kind of leaning that way.
Yeah, it's currently $2,500 over at Accessories for Less.
Yeah.
As of this recording.
Yeah, so I mean, the X8500HA, that was just the X8500H with the HDMI board replaced to be HDMI 2.1 instead of, because the X8500H was 2.0, HDMI 2.0. The HA swapped out the HDMI board. Now that is still the one in, two out HDMI board. That's the same for the X6700H as well. And in his case, it doesn't really matter because he's still using a plasma and a projector. So he doesn't really need HDMI 2.1. But it's the two Odyssey slots. So what does the X8500H offer that the 6700H doesn't? Well, the 8500H has fully assignable amplifiers. So you can take any amplifier channel and assign it to any speaker that you want. But you just want to do a 9.1.4 configuration as far as channels go. So you don't need to like freely assign to like some crazy zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, contraption setup, which the 8500H lets you do more easily. If you have a whole bunch of zones, that's where it sort of excels. But that's not what you're doing. You'd be more interested in the screen up versus screen down, and the 6700H has an advantage there. So it costs less. It has that feature. I'd point you to the X6700H.
So you're talking about Odyssey having two different settings for screen up versus screen down, but why would he need that if it's the same speakers in the same configuration? Why would that?
Well, I mean, acoustically transparent isn't 100% acoustically transparent. If there's any attenuation.
Does it go in front of the? I can't see a flat panel or anything in here.
It's very blacked out. But if you look at the first image, you can see the speakers are actually covered in the red cloth.
Oh, it's not right at the bottom there. It's not that lighter spot at the bottom. I thought that was the lighter spot at the bottom of the front wall.
No. If you look at the very first image, then the left and right speakers are covered by the red on vertical stripes on the left and right, and there is a flat panel in the middle of that. It's very blacked out.
Oh, I can't see any of that. Yeah. Okay. All right. I see what you're saying. I imagine that the two configurations are going to be remarkably similar as far as I don't know that it would even be worth switching between the two, but it might be. I mean, you can test it out and see how it goes. I would just go for the least expensive receiver that does all this stuff, because your room is not small, but it's not huge, and if you've got an amp for your front three speakers anyways, I'm not worried about that. So I would go with the least expensive one, and you're already halfway there with your refund. So $2,500 at Accessories for Less, full 3-year warranty. In
this instance, the advantageous feature and the lower price are one and the same. So that makes it the choice.
Jack, we have recommended the KEF T-Series speakers many times, typically when someone needs super flat form factor for their surround speakers or something like that. Audio Science Review recently posted their measurements of the T101, and they look pretty bad. They roll off pretty sleepily below 200 hertz, which wasn't a criticism or a surprise given their super thin design and the fact that the speakers were measured away from any boundaries. However, the real problems indicated a big hump at 900 hertz and a big dip right at the crossover frequency of 1.7 kilohertz. There's another hump across the whole octave from 4 kilohertz to 8 kilohertz, all of which led Amir to conclude that this is one of the worst sounding and most uneven measuring speakers he has ever tested. And when he tried placing it with its back to a boundary, since most people are probably wall mounted, it was the least hi-fi sound I could describe, said the person who has already made that decision based on his measurements. That's why you take your measurements second. And
he says he does. First. He says he listens first, but then he's never disagreed with himself. So
Yeah.
I questioned it a little bit because the review is
But
written
then he
after
praised,
both.
yeah. Then he praised its power handling and said that the EQ was able to solve some of its major ills, but not to the level that makes it okay to my ears. So obviously not a recommendation from him. Jack has never heard them for himself. We've recommended them, but also mentioned that they aren't a timbre match for really good speakers. So are they just a case of being the best of the worst, kind of like sound bars, where if the form factor takes priority, this is the compromise? Never in the history of us have we recommended this speaker for somebody who said that they wanted really good sounding speakers. This always comes up, and honestly, we get these kind of questions all the time, and these kind of questions come up constantly in real life as well. Somebody comes up to me and says, I want a speaker and it needs to fit here. And I'm like, nothing fits there. Like, nothing fits there. Why would anything fit there? Look at the space. It's a ridiculous space. Nothing fits here. Like, well, I found this online. I'm like, well, then you should buy it. Like, well, how is it going to sound good? I'm like, it doesn't matter. It fits there. And that's what you need. You didn't care how good it sounded. You wanted something that is going to be thin, or it's going to be small, or it's going to be short, or it's going to be tall, it's going to be wide, it's going to be, it's going to be all these different things. It's got to be silver, it's got to be white, it's got to be, on wall, in ceiling. No, you never once did you care about how it sounded. So when we suggest these things, oftentimes, at least with this speaker in particular, we're like, the compromise was already agreed to by the questioner. The questioner says, I know that it's not the best for sound, but what I need is ... And then we say, this KEF speaker checks that box for you, or those boxes for you.
Yeah.
That being said, I as a reviewer, as I've been a reviewer for over 20 years, people, I don't do measurements anymore because it's just not worth the hassle. There's just, all you get when you do measurements is people complaining and arguing with you and everything else. And I would just rather just give my subjective opinion. But I will tell you, I have never, I always write the review that has all the subjective stuff before I actually take the measurements. I take the measurements last. And it's not because I am though I am, that I'm trying to be, objective and everything else and worried about objectivity, which I am, but that's not why I do it. I do it because I'm super lazy and I hate taking measurements. It's a pain in the butt.
It is,
and I don't like doing it.
Yeah.
So I always do it last. And then when I worked for Audioholics, I would send those measurements off to Gene, and then he would send them back to me as part of the review I had already sent to him for editing. So I had sent him the review for editing with all my subjective opinions, and he would send it back and say, it's amazing how close you were with your ears on these things. And it's not because I'm a golden ear or because I whatever. Believe me, these things are not that. That's what people fail to grasp on these things. They are not that hard to pick out. It's just a little bit of A-Bing, and you're like, yeah, I can hear it. And it's anybody. Anybody would sit in the room and hear the same thing I'm hearing. So, I don't know Amir or any of these people. I don't know how they do their reviews and all that. But it's very, very hard not to change your review unless you do it the way I did it. And it's simply because I could take the measurements, but I didn't have the software to do all the analysis. And that's what Gene had. And that's the reason why I did it the way I did. If you are buying the KEF T101 speakers, you did not buy them because of how they sounded. You bought them because of how they looked, and there's nothing wrong with that. Well, you just have to live with it.
I do want to clarify, because I've said the words, and this is going back years, but I've said the words. They sound remarkably okay for how thin they are. Like, I know if that wasn't...
Could you hedge that any harder?
If that wasn't verbatim, I said something very, very close to that. But that's not necessarily clear enough, because not everybody understands sort of the inherent limits of creating something that thin that is producing sound. That isn't, just completely face value obvious. So I'm familiar enough with speakers and general speaker design to go, okay, if you create a speaker that thin, and these things are like what are they, barely an inch in thickness?
Yeah,
I don't think they're even
ridiculous.
that. There are very few other options that are even that thin, but anything that is remotely close to being as thin as these are sound so awful that like the alternatives are to the point where you're at like, I don't even recognize the song I'm listening to anymore other than by the lyrics. Like, that's how bad speakers that skinny get. So to me, the KEF T-Series is like, oh, at least I can recognize the song that's playing. And I'm like, that's remarkably good for speakers this skinny. But I don't think I've ever recommended them as front speakers. I don't think I've ever done that. I've only ever recommended.
We have.
Have we?
I think
as
we
front
have.
Speakers?
Yeah, but they wanted very, very thin on-wall speakers around, around the fireplace or something like that, where and they didn't want a sound bar.
Yeah,
I mean, that's about the only time I would have thought that we would have done it. But I feel like we have, but it doesn't really matter.
But in any event, like actually, if you look at the measurements he took, and he did a full clipple, measurement, so that's doing the whole double sphere of measurements with a motorized, robot arm, basically taking the measurements for you. It is very accurate in a lot of ways. But honestly, if you look at the humps and dips, it's like it's still within like +/6. I'm like, it's not even that bad. Like, honestly, I kind of expected it to be worse. To be completely truthful, if the measurement had been worse than what Audio Science Reviews showed, that wouldn't have shocked me. I don't even think they're that terrible. And then when you do EQ them, like I agree, a lot of the worst ills are kind of solved. Like especially the humps. You can tame the humps. That's really not hard for EQ to do.
There's only one really big. There's only one biggish dip, and it's what 5, not even 5 dB. It's around and
it's right at the crossover. The other thing is Amir follows the Harman guidelines, and he only ever listens to the speaker in mono, bang on axis. And I'm like, these speakers were not designed to be listened to on axis. Absolutely not, because these are supposed to be flush on the wall, off axis from you. Listening to them bang on axis in mono, I'm like, yeah, that's gonna lay bare a bunch of sound that in use you're probably not gonna notice to the same degree because you're supposed to be off axis from these things. So all in all, I can still recommend them when the form factor counts. But yes, are these the pinnacle of sound quality? Absolutely not. And if we ever led you to believe that that's what we were recommending them based on, then I apologize for that, because that is not true. These are not the best sounding speakers. But like I say, try and find an alternative that sounds any better. That's the yardstick.
Yeah. Scrolling through these measurements. Oh, I scrolled past that. Chris T. Up to our third Chris.
I did have to put in the initials.
Guys, just talk amongst yourselves. The council of Chris's. Chris has a 7.2.6 configuration using the 3-receiver method to matrix the top middles. He was using 6 outdoor speaker Depot MK650 in ceilings, but one of them started to buzz, and that model has been discontinued. So he picked up a pair of Sonance Mag 6s, as well as a pair of outdoor speaker Depot Ace 650s. At first blush, the Sonance seemed better, but how can he do a more controlled A-B comparison? These are 4 Atmos speakers. Do you really need to do that?
Well, they're going to be 6 Atmos speakers in total. He's got 6 overheads.
So he's going to replace them all.
Possibly. I mean, if the Sonance are that much better, then you can't have mismatching, can you? You got to have 6 identical speakers.
Just watch me have non-identical speakers in my ceiling, because I would absolutely do that.
So in this instance, I think he's got a setup that actually makes his life a bit easier, because you don't even have to worry about reconfiguring your primary receiver. What I'm going to suggest to you is, since he's doing the crazy 3-receiver setup, it means that his top front left and his top rear left speaker, those are already wired to the front left and right outputs of, I'll call it extra receiver number 1. And then his top front right and top rear right are already wired to the front left and right outputs of, I'll call it extra receiver number 2. And then the top middle speakers are wired to the center speaker outputs of the 2 extra receivers. So to me, you can actually do a pretty easy A-B comparison. What you would have is top front left, top rear left, still wired to extra receiver number 1. And then you would basically just Y-split a stereo source to the 2 receivers.
Right.
And then you could just mute one of the receiver while you listen to the other. And that would also allow you to level match between the two sides of the room, because you have two AV receivers powering two.
You'd have to lie down on the ground or on the couch and with your head in between the two, and then flip to the other side of the couch so that you're now, I mean, it's a little silly, but it will absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, if the point is to compare these speakers in situ, in the ceiling where they're going to be, so I mean, you've got three pairs to compare to each other, but so that's going to mean some going up and down on a ladder to take out and replace speakers in your ceiling. But that's the way I would do it, because to me, it's hassle, but it's the least amount of hassle. Now, if you didn't have this 3 receiver set up already, if this is someone else who just has 1 receiver, I would do a similar thing. I would use the speaker A versus speaker B, because there's you're rewiring, but there's no reason why your overhead speakers can't be wired to the front left and right binding posts just temporarily to do this comparison. So I would either do speaker A versus speaker B, or if you don't have speaker A and speaker B on your receiver, if you have zone 2, you could do, main front left and right versus zone 2 left and right. In any regard, I'm just wiring them as front speakers to do the comparison. That's how I would do it.
So we'd also like to compare whether having the matrix top middles actually sounds better than having 4 overhead speakers and relying on the phantom imaging. Is there Atmos content he could download or purchase to test that out, or another method we can think of to compare that in a more controlled manner? I just like what Rob was describing from before, where you take a stereo source and you split it to your 2 AV receivers that are controlling the overheads. I would just keep doing that.
Yep.
Turn them both on at the same time, and then, essentially, enable and disable the center channel.
Yeah, and you can do that just with the listening mode, because if you just put the receiver in stereo mode, then it's going to be giving you a phantom center. So it would be a phantom middle speaker in this case, but the physical middle speakers wouldn't be making any sound in stereo listening mode. And then just switch it to, I don't know if they're old enough that it's Dolby Pro Logic, or if it's new enough that it's Dolby Surround, but whatever you're using to upmix and create the center channel that is feeding the top middle speaker, you go to that listening mode, and now the physical top middle speakers are actually making sound. And you can compare the very same source, and the source is just stereo music, just anything with a regular front, left, and right signal.
But you would sit in your chair normally and see whether or not the voice sounds like it's coming up from above you. That's right. Regardless of how you are. Yeah. You have these things set up. Or if it
separates to, it wouldn't be left versus right anymore. It'd be front versus back.
Front versus back. Yeah. You have to make sure that the left speaker or the right, whichever one, is always in the same orientation from you, right? So whatever the left speaker is should either be at the, let's just say that on one receiver you have the left at the front of the room, the right at the back of the room. You have to make sure that's the same on both sides.
Yeah.
Or this thing doesn't work. You have to do that. Chris noticed in the settings of his Epson 5050 UB that there's a power consumption setting, and it has eco, medium, and high as the options. It was set to medium. He tried setting it to high just to see what that does. The sound got louder and the image got brighter, but also changed in color temperature, becoming more red. So is there a recommended setting? And with all the HDR settings already being confusing, this just adds yet another wrinkle. Can we explain what this power consumption setting does and how to best adjust it? It is how bright your lamp is. Basically.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of weird that that's how they label it in the manual and in the settings. Like it's normally the lamp mode. When we ever talk about the lamp mode, for whatever reason, they called it power consumption in the menu.
And I mean, it depends on the room that you're in and everything else, but you want to have it at the lowest possible and still get the best possible image. The reason being, of course, is it extends the life of your lamp. And then if you are a professional calibrator or a neurotic who measures on a regular basis or has a calibrator come in on a regular basis, they will reconfigure that power consumption mode based on how your lamp, how bright your lamp is at that moment. So say when you first, after the first couple of 100 hours, you have somebody come in and calibrate it, they might put it in eco mode and still get all the performance you want because you have a completely blacked out room and complete light control, and they can still get all the color,
reasonably sized
temperature.
Screen.
Right, and then you're not too far away from it. That'll conserve your bulb, and then maybe 1,000 hours later they come back in and they bump it up to low or medium or whatever the next one up is, and they keep doing that until your bulb is at the end of its life and it's on high and it's about to explode, and then you email us and say, should I get a new projector or a new bulb? And we're like, get a new bulb quick. So
now, just switching from medium to high, by all accounts, shouldn't have changed the color temperature, but the lamp mode can be tied to the picture mode. And I think a picture mode change happened here, particularly on something like the Epson 5050 UB, where it has 3 modes that all use the word cinema. Right? It has a cinema picture mode, it has a digital cinema picture mode, and it has a bright cinema picture mode. And the cinema and digital cinema picture modes both put the physical color filter into the light path that is supposed to give you the wider DCI P3 color spectrum, whereas the bright cinema, which is tied to the high lamp mode, so I wonder if maybe that switched on you when you did it, because you have to manually switch the picture mode back when you do that. So I think that's maybe the most likely thing, is that you were probably in cinema mode, which would be a perfectly reasonable picture mode to choose, that does have the wide color filter already in there. And then if you switched to the high lamp mode, the high power consumption mode, and it actually bumped you into the bright cinema picture mode when you did that, then it would change the color temperature because the cinema filter, the color filter would get removed. So I suspect it was that a picture mode changed along with it.
There we go. That's a good observation. Jonathan in the CDEN 4.0. I think he just keeps increasing that number. It's going to be like 17.2.
We're there.
Soon. At this point, Jonathan has calibrated with Odyssey. That should mean 0 on his master volume. Now equates to full reference volume for movies, correct?
As long as they were mastered correctly, then
right.
yes.
As long as they were mastered to the reference volume, then yes, that's correct. Yeah. That seems much too loud to him. For most Ultra HD Blu-rays, he ends up with the volume at least about -7, -15. And for some of the streaming services, it'll maybe get up to -5. Hello, Hulu and Disney Plus, because that's where I
Disney
live.
Plus, yeah.
-7. Disney Plus and Hulu are 7.5 in my world.
Sure.
He has sometimes checked the volume with a handheld SPL meter, but who wants to do that every time you watch something? His concern is safety and protecting his hearing. Are there any guidelines to follow to make sure he remains at safe listening levels? It is not a subtle thing when you are so loud that you are hurting your hearing. Like, you know when this is happening. So
there are durations of things that you're like, this is loud, but I'm enduring it.
OSHA has their different charts and stuff like that you can listen to, and you are not alone in thinking that reference level is too loud. Almost all of us think that, and everyone who's been to an IMAX theater will tell you reference level is too loud to sit there all day long listening to it, and that's why home theater is different than movie theaters. Movie theaters,
and it's why Disney is unfortunately not adhering to it, and they're mastering everything 10 decibels quieter, which is just annoying because we all have volume dials that we can turn down, but they've decided to do it on the production side of things. But this whole time on YouTube, I've been showing the charts from OSHA, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration in the United States, or NIOSH, which is the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. I prefer to go with the more conservative, which is the NIOSH recommendations. Now, both of them agree that 85 decibels SPL, and that actually should be SPL-A because that's A-weighted, which is primarily the vocal range. But both of them agree 85 decibels SPL, you can endure for 8 hours without hearing damage. Now, 85 decibels SPL is reference level, average level. So if your movie is longer than 8 hours, you want to turn that down a bit because you can start to have hearing loss created from an 85 decibel sound pressure level that you're enduring for 8 hours. Now, NIOSH says for every 3 decibel increase above 85 decibels, decrease the exposure time by half. Whereas OSHA says for every 5 decibel increase, decrease the exposure by half. So I say go with the conservative. Now, reference level says that the peaks in your speakers could be as loud as 105 decibels. And you'll notice the exposure time for that is about 4 minutes under NIOSH. It's about 4 minutes. Now,
continuous, though.
Continuous. So that is the gunshot that is not, going for 4 minutes long. That might be an explosion or something. Now, this is one of the reasons why I like Michael Bay's Transformers movies that have a sustained 95 or 100 decibels for long sections of the movie are downright painful to listen to. So, yeah, I go with those. Now, essentially, full reference volume, if it's used appropriately, if it's not Michael Bay abused, if the very loud things only last for a very short amount of time, it's all within safety. Even under the more restrictive NIOSH safety, it's all within safety. You're okay. But it's not impossible for a movie to exceed these durations at, 100 decibel levels. NIOSH is saying if it's 100 decibels, you shouldn't be withstanding that for more than 15 continuous minutes. And I think some of those Transformers movies exceed that. So, yeah. But by and large, even if you had it at full reference volume for movies, you'd be okay as far as safety goes.
Because you're not spending the entire movie at 85 either.
No.
It's going to be sections that are going to be lower than that. And it's not like that. And honestly, you're going to get a headache, when these things happen. Your body will tell you that something bad is going on. Yeah. But yes, I have been to movies where it's, in our theaters, and I paused there for a second because I wanted to think about it for a moment, but in our theaters, if you are following all of our advice and our guidance, and you've got, good quality speakers that are not being overblown or distorted, you can get it up to 85, the reference volume, and you can listen to it, and it can be fine for most of it. You might end up at the end of a Michael Bay movie or a Lord of the Rings movie, after 3.5 hours or whatever, with a little bit of a headache or, having had to turn it down from time to time. But you'll be okay. But what hurts more than anything, in my experience, has been distortion. When your speakers start to distort and things start to happen, now all of a sudden you're like, it's like your eyes squint and your teeth start to grate and you're like, I gotta turn it down. So, that's another part of this, as far as how we hear things and how we react to them. But
if you tend to find minus 15 is where you like to listen, A, that's perfectly fine.
That's fine
because reference level is loud, and B, you are not in any danger. You're completely not in any danger.
Not only that, you're already doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you could be reacting to the fact that something isn't mastered correctly.
Sure.
And it's mastered way too loud, which is kind of where a lot of these streaming services are. They're like, I don't turn anything up past, until Disney and Hulu recently. I haven't turned anything up past like minus 17.
Sure.
It's about the loudest I would get.
Like, and now YouTube definitely might be way louder than that, because YouTube doesn't adhere to reference volume, and people peg everything to full scale on YouTube. Yeah. So that could be dangerously loud at 0 on your volume dial. On
oh my God, I would think I would hurt my speakers at 0 because I listen to YouTube at minus 26. The loudest is minus 26, 24. In that range. And if I'm trying to enjoy myself and maybe have a little bit of a conversation, it's minus 30, 36,
no, because there's videos on YouTube where the average level is 105 instead of 85. So
yeah, for sure. Eric has been plugging away, gradually adding insulation to the exposed roof in his garage, leaving an air gap behind it for air movement as we suggested, and covering it with speaker grill cloth. It's a grind, and while it's made a difference, he still has a slap echo, so he knows he needs to treat his walls too. Once the ceiling is done, he'll get there little by little, and you can see some pictures on YouTube. You can see how it's going. It looks like he's taping it up there almost. Those
are like straps. It's not tape.
Oh,
it's like
that's
like
cool.
A strap
I like it. And this is all rigid. Looks like rigid fiberglass.
It looks like Roxel.
Or whatever.
Looks like it's Roxel.
Yeah. So his questions are on a different topic this week. Oh, good. He was interested when we shared the old Dolby diagrams from 2001. Can we explain why we think it's better to have the surround speakers slightly elevated than flat on the side walls, pointing straight at each other rather than angled to aim directly at the listener? So many reasons that I wrote an article about it. But in general, the tweeter should have line of sight to every ear on the couch. If you can figure out a way to do that, have it to your side or slightly behind you, which is where Dolby tells you to put it, and at ear level, then that's where you can put them. But since in my world, where physics are a thing, and geometry and biology, you need to elevate them so the tweeter can see every single ear on that side of the couch.
Yeah, most of us have backs on our chairs, unlike some of the Dolby diagrams. And if you are not the only person in your theater and maybe somebody is beside you, then, you know, they're not acoustically transparent, that person beside you. So that's why we elevate. As for the aiming directly at each other instead of like the current Dolby diagrams where everything is towed in to be aimed directly at the one person, that basically just comes down to the cone of dispersion that I talk about all the time, which is if you get right up close to a speaker, you start with yourself bang on axis to it and you just play some pink noise and you move yourself to the left and you move yourself to the right, you'll find that there's a cone of dispersion where the sound is pretty darn even, and then some speakers it gradually shifts, and some speakers it's almost like there's a line boundary that's drawn at some angle where the sound of that pink noise, the timbre of it just changes. But you'll find this cone of dispersion, and I want all of the listeners within the cone of dispersion. That's what I'm aiming for. So when everybody is equally off axis from the speaker, everybody's getting the similar sound. If one person has it bang on axis and somebody else is therefore outside of the cone of dispersion, then everybody on that couch is getting a different sound. So I'd rather have everybody slightly off axis, but all within the cone of dispersion. So that's our rationale for actually preferring the old diagrams.
Yeah, have them pointed at each other because everybody's sitting just a little bit to the on the off axis side. So he originally got his Polk FX1A6 surrounds prior to when he started listening to our podcast because they look like the most like what he was seeing in speaker placement diagrams, and their trapezoidal design made it easy to have one face aiming directly at the main listening position. But then there are a bunch of different surround speaker designs. There's using just a regular bookshelf speaker. There are monopole on-wall speakers that are basically like a flattened bookshelf. There are the trapezoidal surround speakers with symmetrical drivers on the angled faces, trapezoidal surrounds with asymmetrical drivers like his Polks, and also surrounds with drivers on three faces, typically a flat face on the front with the woofer, or maybe a woofer plus a tweeter, and then two angled faces with tweeters and sometimes mid-range drivers. It's all too confusing. You forgot about the quad ones, which are the ones that Axiom has, which has speakers on the top and the bottom and the trapezoidal sides. He says you thought it was confusing before, and now I just added that one too. It's all too confusing, he says. Can we say which type is best and further explain bipole versus dipole? Boy, we've done that so many times. But Dolby lies and says that they have always recommended monopole speakers for your surrounds and your surround backs. That has never been the case.
Which is just a normal speaker, like a regular bookshelf speaker. That's a monopole speaker.
Yeah. Well, and the ones that you would describe that are flat, that are like flattened bookshelves, same deal, okay? They've started saying since Atmos, oh no, this is all we've ever recommended. Lies. You have said many times that it's perfectly fine to have the bipole, dipole speaker on the sides, but you don't anymore, and that's fine. So if you are buying new speakers right now, the recommendation almost always is to buy a monopole type speaker for your side surrounds and your surround backs. Before Atmos, the general consensus was you would buy a trapezoidal type speaker. It would be fine for your side surrounds because it gives you a more diffuse sound, but your surround backs would be monopole speakers because that's that's what the recommendation was.
It was. That's just
I really can't
was.
tell you. I honestly can't tell you the rationale because I remember asking people explaining and me going, well, that doesn't make any damn sense. And that's sort of where it was. But that's what the recommendation was. I've given it on this podcast hundreds of times because we've been going for 13 plus years now. So this is, I have lived this life. you have these speakers, which are, do we know if these are bipolar or dipoles? I didn't have a chance to look them up.
You know what? I think there's actually a switch on them to let you choose.
So,
so I mean, just to get to the dipole thing, because I might as well explain it quickly. I'll use the example that you have, the speakers that you have, those Polk FXI A6
I'm gonna click on that.
surround speakers. Now, there is only one woofer, so let's not worry about that. Let's just worry about the two tweeters. The two tweeters are on two separate angled faces of this trapezoid shape, and I do believe there is a switch to put them in either dipole or bipole mode.
There is.
Yeah, the only difference there is that if it is a bipole configuration, so look at the two tweeters, if those two tweeters are in bipole configuration, it means both tweeters move out at the same time and in at the same time. They are in phase with one another, they just both do the exact same movement as each other, out together, in together. If they are in dipole mode, it means they are 180 degrees, or they have reverse polarity of each other. It means that when one of those tweeters is moving out, the other tweeter is sucking in. And then when the one that sucked in pushes out, the one that was originally pushing out sucks in. They are completely inverse polarity when they are in dipole mode. Now, a dipole speaker will create a null. It will create a cancellation. And that cancellation will happen right in between the two drivers. So with a dipole speaker, if you literally sit right beside it so that your head is positioned right in between those two tweeters, at that location, you'll be right in a null where you're not hearing any direct sound. And in certain instances, that is still advantageous. I've described it as when you have a seat that is right up against your side wall. If you don't want that seat to be distracted by the surround speaker that's right beside it, make the speaker that's right beside that seat that's pushed right up against the side wall a dipole surround speaker, because then that person is sitting in the null and they aren't actually, they're getting the cancellation of the sound. They aren't getting their ear blasted off by a speaker right there. So I still see a use for dipole surround speakers in some situations, specifically when you have a seat right up against a wall, and that's where the speaker needs to go. But other than that, I would always choose monopole speakers today. I would either just have a pair of bookshelf speakers on stands that are tall enough that you can have a clear line of sight from the tweeter to every listener, or I would wall mount some monopole speakers. That's it.
Okay. Yeah. So you can switch yours to dipole if that's what you're worried about. When he is done with treating his room, he still wants to consider a speaker upgrade. Should he sell his Polks and look at other options?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to say yeah to that. I'm going to be honest with you.
There are upgrades to be had.
There are upgrades. Yeah, you can do better. One that caught his eye are the Magnat Cinema Ultra speakers, which garnered a glowing review from Andrew Robinson online. They seem like a flexible, great option at a reasonable price. Do we have any thoughts on them? He was also considering ascending Monoprice's Monolith THX speakers. This is a very small theater. I don't know that you need to have massive speakers in here.
Yeah, THX Ultra certified. So Magnat, that's a German speaker company, and it does look like they've begun selling Internet Direct in the USA. They're not available Internet Direct in Canada, but in the USA they do appear to be available directly from Magnat's North American website. Now, the designs of the Cinema Ultras, I mean, these are pretty standard THX design speakers. They are sealed design. They only play down to 80 hertz. All of that is perfectly fine by me. Really high power handling. And since for the main speakers, the left, center, right speakers, they've gone for a woofer design to get away from some of the worst lobing and comb filtering that you might get with that design. They've actually used a larger tweeter with a very low crossover point. And that helps. That helps with things like the lobing and comb filtering you might get from an MTM design. So everything about the design of them looks completely reasonable. Nice high power handling. If they pass THX Ultra certification, then it's pretty hard to have a really bad speaker at that point. If they
kind of expensive, $650 a pop.
They're not cheap. They're not cheap. Yeah, they're not crazy expensive. There are definitely more expensive THX Ultra certified speakers, but they're not. You don't need these. They're big too.
They're huge.
These are big, and I would say that of the Monolith speakers too. They are physically very large,
not small speakers.
I think for very good quality and value, if because I think he's maybe a little bit interested in the sort of on-wall design that these can do. I would point you to Ascend's HTM 200 SE all day long, because that is the sealed design. You can wall mount it if you want to. It's more appropriate for the sort of output that you need in this room. Still has very high power handling, and the sound quality. I put that up against just about anything for like less than half the price. So I would point you quite strongly to Ascend's HTM 200 SEs if it's the form factor they want. I also think the HTM 200 SEs are much closer to the size that you're picturing these as, because these are big speakers.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I'm just looking at these and not seeing anything that makes me think that this is a good speaker for you. I mean, I don't want any of the trapezoidal ones in here. I don't see any reason for you to get those. So you're down to essentially the LCRs, because the subwoofer doesn't make it. the subwoofer doesn't make any sense. You don't want the upward firing modules because I mean,
that's not going to work on that new ceiling of yours. That's
your entire ceiling is absorption, so I don't know that that's going to really help you all that much. So you're basically looking at that one speaker, and I'm looking at that one speaker and going,
$680 each.
Super exciting about this speaker, and knowing that it's THX will 100% be a flat sounding speaker, which you can get for less money than $650 a pop.
Yeah,
and so what Rob recommended, the Ascends are a perfectly good option. SVS's prime. I mean, you could even go satellites in here, depending on which, especially for your surround duties. Really small speakers that you can put very close to a wall without a problem. I mean, I think you can spend a lot less money and get the exact same performance that you're going to experience, and then you can spend the rest of it on subs that will crush your entire house.
Yeah.
Since structurally the roof is still unfinished and it's just a garage, he gets vibrations that shake the image from his projector with his current $20 ceiling mount, which is basically mounted to a piece of plywood that's going across his
he spanned
joist.
Across some joists there. Yeah.
He found a stress decoupler ceiling bracket that attaches to regular 1.5-inch NPT pipe. Would that stop the vibrations, or should he construct some sort of hanging box and then set the projector on some rubber foam or something? There is a projector vibration system that you can buy that does this.
Yeah, it's a anti-vibration ceiling plate. Yeah, I mean, I think the name says it. That's
what it does. It does what's on the box.
That's pretty much what you need. No, I mean, it's the exact same idea as what you went to, except the one that you went to seemed to be more about. It just had a completely different attachment system. So the one that I'll have a link to is Peerless's anti-vibration ceiling plate. It is the same idea as what you described. You're going to thread some 1.5-inch national pipe thread into there, attach that to your universal spider mount, and mount your projector to the anti-vibration plate.
All right.
$64, by the way, which is not insane.
Not that expensive. Julian and his family were away over Christmas. They let a friend of a friend stay at their place while they were out. He gave them strict instructions not to use the home theater. They came back to find the projector running with its lens cap on. Oh, my children. Luckily, I don't have a lens cap. It has a sliding door that slides closed on it. So I don't have to worry about that, but I can't tell you how many times I've walked into my theater at like 9 a.m. and my children are all asleep and the projector's on. And it's just projecting nothing on the screen. And I'm just like, I can't wait till you people move out. I don't even care if you go to college. Just move out. It might have been on for a full day like this. It's an Epson 3800, and he had it in a medium lamp mode. When they went to watch a Blu-ray a day later, it was slightly out of focus, which has never been the case before. So, is there any chance some damage was done to the lens or to the lamp from having the projector running with the lens cap on for so long? He's got a spare lamp, but doesn't want to replace it if it isn't necessary. There's only about 400 hours on the current lamp. So most lens caps are sort of translucent. I don't know what yours is. My lens cap that on the last projector I had was a translucent one, so it would let some light through, which would dissipate some of the heat. If it is a black lens cap or a very dark one, that's going to keep all that heat in there, and that's what we call not great.
Not great. It shouldn't have really hurt the lamp, though, because that still has its regular exhaust vents. I mean, that's where the lion's share of the lamp
it would have engaged the fan a lot more
Sure.
than you would have been used to. But that would be the thing I would worry about from the lamp side of it. Is the lens cap keeping the heat in, and somehow that the fan not being able to keep up and then shortening the life of the
I just
lamp.
don't see that, like, the lens itself being so much of a heat sink that would hurt the lamp. Because the lens that's being covered, it's not like if they had covered up the vents, then yeah, I'm worried about the lamp.
Well, who knows what they did?
Who knows what they did? But the lens itself, I'm like, well, if you were able to refocus it, then I think you're okay. I think having had the lens cap on for possibly 24 hours while it was running, that might have. I could see that potentially warping the lens. I think it's actually a plastic lens in the 3800. So
that I didn't even think of. Yeah.
I could see it warping, but if you were able to refocus it, I actually think the more likely thing was that this, I would say from now on, unwanted guest was probably like, hey, I tried to turn on the thing and nothing happened, and probably like went up there and touched something and probably messed your focus up. I think that's probably more likely.
Yeah, I tried to pull the lens cap off and was unsuccessful.
Yeah. So I would say as long as you were able to refocus it, then I think that thankfully is okay. And I wouldn't expect the lamp to have had some real major problem from having run like that. So I think you're okay.
Yeah. Yeah, the focus, as long as it's not what Rob suggested, which was the lens, the plastic lens somehow being warped, I wouldn't worry too much about that. I would think that if they're doing stuff they're not supposed to be doing, just assume that they're going to continue to do more stuff.
If you had said it was out of focus and I was unable to get it back into focus, then I'd be like, ugh. But it sounded like he was able to get it refocused. So I think you're perfectly fine. I'm honestly not worried about the lamp very much at all.
Yeah. His wife is not keen on painting the ceiling dark to help the projector's image, but she likes the retractable screen. So Julian was wondering if there's a product that would basically be a retractable dark fabric that would cover up the front portion of their ceiling. Speaker grill cloth tacked up there that you can tell your wife, you can pull it down. We can pull it down whenever you want. That would be my solution to this problem. Like, or velvet or whatever. You know, ask her about that. I mean, like paint is permanent, but itty bitty holes in your ceiling that nobody can see.
Or it could even be Velcro, because you can get colored Velcro that maybe if your ceiling is white, you can get white Velcro. It doesn't have to be black Velcro. So could maybe do something like that.
That would be the solution. I would I would push hard for the paint and then offer this as an alternative. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because I was trying to think of like motorized curtain rods, but we're trying to do this like horizontally, and they'd have to be like perfectly in sync, and I think some of it depends on gravity, so like I don't think that would work out too. I don't know of a product exactly what you're describing, which is like you hit a button and like, you know, I mean, I guess there's got to be motorized shades and stuff. Something should be potentially like modifiable.
Nothing is as cheap as tacks and velvet.
Velcro. I think Velcro is the right solution.
So I already said that. He settled on the medium lamp mode because he was under the impression that eco mode wouldn't be bright enough to deliver HDR, but he likes how quiet the projector is in eco mode, and outside of HDR, eco seems to be bright enough for their taste. Would it be okay to watch HDR content with the matte lamp in eco mode? We're not the boss of you. I mean, no one's going to come into your home theater in the middle of you watching a movie and go, heresy, eco mode. take his projector, grab his screen, and off they go. That's not how this works. You watch it in whatever mode you want there, Haas. It's your projector, and I mean, like we said earlier, if you've got the ability to black out, it's only 400 hours on this. So this is at probably the brightest it's ever going to be. This bulb is at its maximum brightness. If you're going to be able to see a decent HDR image in eco mode, now's the time. So I would say watch it however you want. Just do it.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the only counter that I would offer to that is that as far as the tone mapping goes, the tone mapping is actually expecting you to be in high lamp mode. I hate to say it.
Right.
I hate to say it, but that is what the tone mapping that's built into the projector is expecting, is that when it goes into HDR mode, it's expecting to be in high lamp mode, not even medium. So he's actually going to ask about this later, I believe, with the Ultra HD Blu-ray player. That might be very useful if you want to use Eco Lamp mode while you're in HDR picture mode. I'll tease that for coming up.
Okay. When he hits play on a movie, he can hear the audio, but then there's about a 15-second delay before the image shows up on this projector. That is not the case with the flat panel TV that is behind the pull-down screen. Both displays are fed from his Marantz SR8015. Once the image shows up, everything is fine, but would a change of HDMI cable help? Or is it just the nature of his Epson 3800 projector? He's using a premium high-speed HDMI cable from Monoprice. This is just how these things go. I hate to say it.
Yeah, it's just the blanking that happens when it is, changing from between HD and 4K signal, between 60 frames per second and 24 frames per second, between standard dynamic range and high dynamic range. Whenever that picture change, that signal change happens, it's just slower than your flat panel.
If someone could come to my house and explain to me why Disney sometimes loses audio for no reason while I'm watching Disney Plus, like I'll press play and everything's playing fine, and I'll pause or I'll rewind it a little bit because somebody in my theater was talking when they shouldn't have been, and I press play again. There's no audio, and I got to rewind it again until the audio kicks back in. No idea why. Just does it. So
changing your HDMI cable will change nothing in this scenario.
No. His Ultra HD Blu-ray player is a Sony X700. It has a setting for projector versus TV, and he had it set to projector, but isn't sure what it does. He read a review that strongly suggested that using a player that does its own tone mapping, such as the Panasonic UB420, or that strongly suggested that he should be doing that, the UB420, would that make a worthwhile difference? The Epson 3800 doesn't have dynamic tone mapping that I'm aware of.
It does not have frame by frame, nor does the Panasonic. We got to be clear, the Panasonic is not doing frame by frame. But
so what you can do with a source like that is if you can tell it if it usually they have different ranges, like so it'll say TV, projector, blah blah blah, which basically sets a maximum nit level, then tone maps everything that it sees to that nit level. Might be 1,000, might be 700. It just depends on what the setting is. So if the Panasonic UB has one that is more closely aligned to what your projector can actually do, then that would be the one that you would go for. But if the Sony has the exact same ones
but the Sony does not have the HDR optimizer like the Panasonic UB420 does. As far as I'm aware, that TV versus projector setting is for the HDR to SDR conversion. It's nothing to do with HDR display. I'm not 100% on that though. Don't completely quote me on that. I'm not completely sure what the projector versus TV output thing on the Sony X700 is either. But its thing that it does is HDR to SDR conversion. I would actually say, from everything you described, I do think the Panasonic UB420 would be moderately helpful to you, because you want to use the lower lamp mode, and it would be beneficial to you there. You'd set it to the lowest possible setting for the HDR optimizer, which in the case of the UB420 is 500 nits, and that will help you to retain some more of the highlight detail that's going to get lost in your current setup. So I think you have justification for spending the money to get a Panasonic UB420.
There you go. Last week Terry asked about his HSU VTF3 Mark IV, which had started to occasionally make a scary slap sound whenever the loudest bass hits would happen. We correctly guessed that it was he had one of his ports plugged and the sub set to extension mode, so he did what we suggested. He removed the port plug and set the sub to maximum output mode, and that has fixed the problem.
Woohoo!
Rob is right again.
Hooray for suspicions.
I definitely didn't even think about that. We mentioned that maybe some air was escaping around the port plug, and that might have been the cause of the scary sound. But the port plug was super secure, so much so that you had to wedge some pieces of plastic around the edges of the port to loosen the plug when he removed it. He tried putting his hand on the sub while it was playing some super loud bass and making the scary slap sound. He could feel a physical thump. So would that indicate it was actually bottoming out? He's had the sub for years, and this never happened before. But it does seem like it started after the first time he recalibrated using the Odyssey Editor app a few months ago. He's still just curious why it started happening, and if the sub is just wearing out. What do we think? I think that if you took the port plug up and it stopped happening, you have fixed the problem. And that is the end of this discussion. Good day, sir. That's what I think.
But I also, if you were feeling a physical jolt when it was making the weird sound, and you're certain it wasn't like a flapping of the port plug, I, again, have my suspicions that he's like, yeah, this started happening after the first time I used the Odyssey Editor app. I'm like, did you use that to put in a big old bass boost at like 10 hertz? Because a lot of people use it to put a big old bass boost at like 10 hertz or 16 hertz or something below 20. And that could have done this. That definitely could have done. If you're like, hey, my HSU subs has extension mode and now it's supposed to play down and be only minus 3 dB at 16 hertz, but I'm not like noticing all the bass below 20 hertz, so I'm going to put in a big old bass bump using my Odyssey Editor app. I wouldn't blame you. There's a gazillion people telling you to do it online. It's not great advice. So I suspect that's what went on. I think you probably put into yourself a bass boost below 20 hertz to try and take advantage of the extension mode. And that can bottom out an HSU sub. They aren't impervious.
Well, stop it.
Yeah.
How about that? So what is the purpose of the EQ1 or the extension mode versus the EQ2 max output mode switch on the back? Why does HSU even allow it if it's possible to make the subwoofer bottom out in one of these modes? Again, I wrote an article about how independent subwoofer outputs are evil and the reason they exist is because a very loud vocal minority of people online demanded them, and now we're stuck with them. We're actually starting to see more receivers come out with just Y splitters inside again, which is
that's what we always had before, and
exactly.
Now it's
and
going
then
back.
we're going back to it, and people are like, so I wrote that article like, oh well, the new RZ50 it just has a Y splitter. I'm like, great. I'm not complaining. That's what I want. Thank you, Onkyo.
But then you can't pay $200 and do direct live bass management. So, grumble. This is a case of at what volume? The extension mode works. It is only minus 3 dB at 17 or 16 hertz or whatever they rate it at, but at what volume? Not at the same volume as you could get at 20 hertz in the max output mode. And that's what I care about. Why do they do it? Because they want to be able to show the graph where it extends below 20 hertz, because there's a whole bunch of people who are like, my subwoofer has to play below 20 hertz because I just, feel like it should. I feel inadequate if it doesn't. So they want to be able to show the graph where it's a nice flat line down to 16 hertz. There, the extension mode does it. But at what volume? A lower volume. And it turns out you wanted more volume at the frequencies you can actually perceive. Remarkably, and that's what they actually designed the subwoofer to do. That's why they put in the amount of port area that they did. So it's there because people requested it. They called it VTF for variable tuning frequency, and that's what it is. But honestly, just leave all the ports open and leave it in max output mode, and it plays down to 20 hertz, the extent to which you can actually perceive bass, really, really well. So leave it alone.
That's right. Shove it in the corner, and you'll get a couple little extra.
Yeah.
Little bump out of the lower end there too. Again, can't hear it. Maybe you can feel it. And there's exceedingly little content that goes below 20 hertz anyways. I mean, all these people worrying about, I've got a sub that can go down to 13 hertz flat. I'm like,
if you can play down to 20, you'll still get the harmonics that you can actually perceive from those lower than 20 fundamentals.
Yeah. All right. Who do we have left here?
Oh, can we not just hit an even 12? Andrew's is pretty short.
It's got 2 questions here.
I know. We can power through it. Let's power through it.
Andrew, who's writing for me at AV Gadgets, but still has questions for the podcast. I think he asked me this question. I said, ask Rob.
Okay.
I think I was.
That's how we arrived here.
I don't remember. What do we recommend for a decent beginner hi-fi pair of headphones? So I remember answering him this, and my thought is, if you're going to go for a good set of when you say hi-fi headphones, it makes me think you want something better than normal. So the two things I recommended to him were to look at either the Hi-Fi Man or Audis, whichever the entry-level magnetic planars that they have.
Hi-Fi Man would be a bit less expensive, so I'd go over there.
Okay. Or look at Sennheiser. Sennheiser are pretty universally good. Now, if you were saying I want a good set of headphones, and I've never had a good set of headphones before, I would recommend like the Audio-Technica M50s, or I would recommend actually just the Audio-Technica M50s are kind of the go-to there. And they're about $120, but they're these are generally very, very flat. They're kind of bulletproof as far as their design. I bought those headphones for this podcast, and I lent them to a friend, and he hasn't given them back to me in like 5 years, and he's still using them. So these things will just last you forever, and they're a great set of like headphones just to have around and go, I'm going to compare everything I own to these, so you know if they're better than really good or not. And so that would be another one that I would go with.
Andrew didn't give us a price point. I'm like,
no, he did not.
You write for AV Gadgets now, and you've listened to us for a long time. He didn't give us a budget, but he didn't give us a price point. So my first thought was Hi-Fi Man Sunderas, which are $350 these days, which I'm like, man, that's a good price for Hi-Fi Man Sunderas. But if that is too high, because $350 is still a good chunk of change, you could definitely look at the HE400s. That is a step down in the Hi-Fi Man lineup, but that's still in the $250 to $300 price range. So getting cheaper than that if you need to. If you're like, my limit is $200 and I can't spend a penny more than that, then I agree that Sennheiser is where I'm going to look. I'm going to look at the 560S, the HD 560S these days. Really nice headphones for $200. In fact, like pretty much all the online gaming people are using those now because they've come around to my way of thinking, which is like, all the headsets that are targeted at gamers are kind of crappy. And these work really, really nicely. You can just add an add-on microphone to them, and voila, you have some fantastic gaming headphones. So $200, the HD 560Ss. If you're going, if $200 was too much and you want to, half the budget, then those Audio-Technica M50Xs or Sony's MDR7506s, which are the standard in every single recording booth that you might ever walk into. They will have a pair of MDR7506s in there for you to use to monitor your own sound as you record your voice in a vocal booth. So for $100, you can get those, and something out of that list will fit the ticket.
So he's got a power conditioner, but not a battery backup. We always recommend APC gaming performance units these days, but is there an inexpensive UPS with a more traditional 17-inch width chassis that would fit in a normal equipment stand? He would plug his power conditioner into the UPS, or would he plug his power conditioner into the UPS or the other way around? The UPS would already be a power conditioner.
Yeah, you'd be selling the power conditioner that you have because you don't need it. And I wish there were like a traditional 17-inch width, looks like a, small AV receiver or a big VCR, big DVD player type of form.
When is APC going to put out home theater specific?
That's what they used to have, the J series, right? The J series used to be exactly that, but it went away. So honestly, the only thing I can point you to is one of those gaming performance. They look like they're meant to stand vertically. They absolutely are. But nothing stops you from laying on its side. If you're actually putting
vents, there's vents on both sides of them.
Are there vents on both sides?
There are. I'm looking at it right now. There's vents on both sides of this.
All right, so you put it on some little feetsies. If you're putting it in a rack, then you'd need a shelf because it's not rack mountable sideways. That's not how it's designed to go.
So if you have a shelf that is perforated, then you just lay it on its side.
Then you just lay it on its side. Yep. Yeah, I mean, or if it's just still, like little rails that you can use to hold it in. So, I mean, for the purposes that he described, I just go for the cheapest one that's in that series. So that'd be the BR1000MS. It's $140 on Amazon. I don't think that's unreasonably priced. And it does all the power conditioning things you might ever want. So you can recoup some of that price by selling your power conditioner, and you're not going to have a, partial way to your UPS.
Has there ever, I don't think there's ever been a battery backup of any kind that doesn't have the power conditioning as part of it because it kind of is necessary.
Yeah, well, there are the ones that don't have the continuous voltage regulation.
Right. Yes.
But these ones do for $140. So there's no need to have an additional power conditioner.
All right, who do we have left?
We have Brad, who's still updating us on his ongoing conversion of his garage. Zach, Jason, Bill, who is Bill's long one. No, Monty was the last one with the very long series of questions. So there we go. That's all on the list for next week.
Did we already answer a Brad question this week? I thought no.
Not this week. I mean, we've been talking to Brad all along, so.
That's a different Brad. All right.
Okay.
Thank our listeners of the week. Thank Kevin, Julian, and Terry for going to avrant.com and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, as well as our 135 patrons over at patreon.com, including Jack, Julian, and Terry.
That's right, Kevin, Julian, Terry, thank you very much for the PayPal donations. Really do appreciate that one-time financial support. And then, patreon.com/AVRant podcast. If you would like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation, and a big thank you to our 135 patrons over there, Jack, Julian, and Terry. I believe the same Julian and Terry. Thank you for being 3 of them.
Great. So I also want to thank Joe for talking us up to Aperion, Bertrand for sending me a movie code, and Mario for sending me a diagram with permission to use it on AV Gadgets.
That's right. I'll just repeat the names. Joe, Bertrand, Mario, thank you very much for your support in other forms besides a donation.
That's right. We also have Jack, Chris, Gurinder, Eric, Dale, Jason, and Monty for thanking us for keeping the podcast going. So thank you for thanking us.
Yes, indeed. One last time to repeat the names: Jack, Chris, Gurinder, Eric, Dale, Jason, and Monty. That was Chris T out of our group of 3 Chris's this week, who was on that list. So thank you for sending us those notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going. We definitely appreciate the notes of encouragement. A big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
That's right. If you want your question answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. For AV Rant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something. We didn't do our new sign-off this week.
I know. Have you been watching Boba Fett?
Yes. Yes, I have.
Not enough Baby Yoda.
Oh, right.
That's pretty much my reaction to that so far.
Has there been any Baby Yoda?
That is what I'm saying. It's 0 Baby Yoda. That's not enough.
Baby Yoda.
Needs more Baby Yoda than 0 Baby Yoda. Lots of Baby Tuskens, Tusk people, whatever they're called. But yeah,
Sand people / Tusken Raiders. Yeah. It turns out Baby Yoda was kind of critical to everyone loving The Mandalorian.
You ain't lying, Haas. I watched simply for that. Like, I did not realize a puppet could emote that much. Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AV Rant.
Now go out and listen to something.